other family fled after only 28 days. Was the house truly haunted? Or was America witnessing one of the greatest paranormal controversies ever created? Amityville, Long Island. The name itself carries a certain weight. It sounds like an idyllic place, and in many ways it is. A suburban community nestled on the south shore of Long Island, about 40 miles east of New York City. Tree-lined streets, waterfront properties, a sense of quiet prosperity that has defined the area for generations. 1112 Ocean Avenue sits on a narrow plot of land that stretches from the street down to the Amityville River, a 3-story Dutch colonial with dark shingles and white trim. 6 bedrooms, a heated swimming pool, a boathouse, a garage. A sign by the front path once read, "High Hopes." It was the kind of house that families dream about, the kind of house that represents everything a family could want. But by the mid-1970s, this house would become synonymous with something far darker. The house was built in the 1920s, a stately structure designed for comfort and family life. The 2 large windows set into the side of the home gave it an almost human quality, as if it were watching the world go by. Inside, the rooms were generous. The master bedroom on the 2nd floor, children's bedrooms down the hall, a 3rd floor with additional space, a finished basement. It was a home designed for a large family, for gatherings, for memories. In 1965, the DeFeo family moved in. Ronald DeFeo Sr., his wife Louise, and their 5 children. They lived there for nearly a decade, through birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and ordinary suburban life. The sign out front said, "High Hopes." It's difficult to imagine the house as it was then, before the hauntings, before the horror, before the world knew its name. Just a home, just a family, just a quiet street in a quiet town. But something happened on November 13, 1974, that would change everything. By all accounts, the DeFeos appeared to be a successful, close-knit family. Ronald DeFeo Sr., known to friends and family as Ron or Big Ron, was 43 years old. He worked as the service manager at a Buick dealership in Brooklyn, a business owned by his wife's family. He was described by some as a hard worker, someone who provided for his family. Louise DeFeo, also 43, was the matriarch, the mother of 5 children, a homemaker who kept the household running. The family attended church. They seemed to have everything, but beneath the surface, there were cracks. Ronald DeFeo Sr. was reportedly a volatile man. Some who knew the family described him as overbearing and physically abusive. Later testimony would reveal that there was frequent strife in the home. The children, like many families, had their own dynamics. The eldest son, Ronald DeFeo Jr., was the one who would become infamous. Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr. was born on September 26, 1951, in Brooklyn. He was nicknamed Butch by his family, a name that would follow him through the rest of his life. By many accounts, Butch was a troubled young man from an early age. He was expelled from school at 16 with no qualifications. By the age of 17, he was using LSD and heroin. In 1974, at 23 years old, he worked as a mechanic at the family dealership, reportedly earning about $80 a week. The relationship between Butch and his father was deteriorating. Butch resented his father. He believed he was being kept on meager wages. There were suspicions that Butch had been involved in thefts. A 12-year-old neighbor who lived nearby later testified that she had witnessed a fistfight between Butch and his father in the days before the killings. Yet, despite the family tensions, the neighborhood was shocked when the full story came to light. The DeFeos, for all their internal conflicts, were still seen as a family of 7. A family with high hopes written on their sign. The other children were Dawn, 18, the eldest daughter, Allison, 13, Mark, 12, and John, 9. Mark had recently suffered a serious injury during football season and needed crutches and a wheelchair. His wheelchair sat beside his bed in the family home. Allison's bedroom walls were decorated with a pattern of pink and yellow flowers. A little television sat on her dresser by the bed. Dawn's room featured a toy monkey sitting on a chair in the corner near the window overlooking the backyard. They were normal children with normal belongings, normal lives. All of this ended early on the morning of November 13, 1974. In the early morning hours of November 13, 1974, 1974, something terrible happened inside 112 Ocean Avenue. Ronald DeFeo Jr., then 23 years old, armed himself with a .35 caliber Marlin 30-36C lever action rifle. He would later claim he had drugged his family with barbiturates to keep them from waking up from the gunshots. The exact sequence of events remains unclear. There are conflicting accounts, but what is known is this: Ronald DeFeo Sr. and Louise DeFeo were shot twice each. The four children, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John, were each killed by a single shot. All 6 family members were found lying face down in their beds, tucked under the covers. Physical evidence suggests that Louise and Allison were awake at the time of their deaths. The murders went undetected for hours. In a 1999 parole hearing, Butch DeFeo gave his version of events. He claimed he was in the basement and heard a noise. When he came upstairs, he saw Allison's blood. I ran up the stairs and Dawn said, "Oh my God, Butch, you are not supposed to be here." He also claimed that Dawn was the instigator of the murders, a claim that others disputed. Her boyfriend at the time said she would have done anything to get out of the house. But these are just claims. What is documented is what happened next. At around 6:30 p.m. on November 13, Butch DeFeo entered Henry's bar in Amityville, about 800 meters from the house, and declared, "You got to help me! I think my mother and father are shot!" DeFeo and a small group of people went to the house. One of the group, DeFeo's friend Joe Yeswit, placed an emergency call to the Amityville Police Department. "Call up the Amityville Police and have someone come down here. They know the family," Yeswit told the dispatcher. "Guy come running in the bar and said his mother and father are shot." We ran down to his house and everybody in the house is shot. When police arrived, they found the 6 bodies in their bed. At first, DeFeo tried to deflect suspicion. He told police that a mob hitman named Louis Fellini might have been responsible. He suggested that his family had been targeted by organized crime. But the story quickly fell apart. Police found inconsistencies in his account. They discovered an empty box for a recently purchased Marlin rifle in his room. The fact that all the family members had been killed in their nightwear suggested the crime had happened at night, placing DeFeo in the house at the time. When DeFeo asked about the hunt for Fellini, one officer replied, "Butch, we have guys out on the street looking for him, but to tell you the truth, I think you're the guy we want." After more than 30 hours of interrogation, DeFeo confessed. He admitted to carrying out the killings himself. His legal team later claimed he had been interrogated without sleep or food for 30 straight hours before making the confession. But the confession was damning. DeFeo told detectives, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." He detailed where he had discarded crucial evidence: blood-stained clothes, the Marlin rifle, and cartridges. He had taken a bath, redressed, and gone to work as usual. He had even called home pretending not to know why his father hadn't arrived. The trial began in October 1975. DeFeo's lawyer, William Weber, ran an insanity defense. The defense claimed DeFeo had been hearing voices, that he was suffering from a mental break. DeFeo testified that he heard voices and that it must have been God talking to me. But the prosecution's psychiatrist, Dr. Harold Zolan, testified that DeFeo had antisocial personality disorder and that he was aware of his actions at the time of the crime. The jury rejected "the devil made me do it" defense. On November 24th, 1975, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder. On December 4, Judge Thomas Stark sentenced him to 6 sentences of 25 years to life in prison. The judge declared that DeFeo's crimes were the most heinous murders committed in Suffolk County since its founding. But the story of 112 Ocean Avenue was far from over. For 13 months after the DeFeo murders, the house at 102 Ocean Avenue sat empty. It was a murder house. The scene of one of the most brutal family killings in recent memory. No one wanted to live there, but houses don't stay empty forever, and the price was right. In December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, a young couple with 3 children, came looking for a home. George Lee Lutz was 28 years old. He owned a land surveying company, a 3rd-generation business started by his grandfather. He had a pretty good idea of land and home values. Kathy Lutz, 30, had been married previously and had 3 children from that marriage: Daniel, 9, Christopher, 7, and Melissa, called Missy, 5. She and George had married recently. They were looking for a home that would accommodate their new family. Between July and November 1975, the couple had looked at over 50 homes on Long Island's South Shore. None met their requirements. The house had to be on the water, and it had to be able to accommodate George's business. In the course of their search, George called the Conklin Realty office and spoke to a broker named Edith Evans. She said she had a new house to show them, a 6-bedroom Dutch colonial with a swimming pool, boathouse, and waterfront access. The asking price? $80,000. $80,000. It seemed almost impossibly low. In a desirable neighborhood, on the water with all those amenities, the house should have been priced far higher. The reason, of course, was the murders. But the price had also dropped because of legal complications around the title. Evans took the Lutzes to the house at 3 in the afternoon.
"I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for," she told them, "but I wanted to show you how the other half of Amityville lives."
They walked through the house. George, with his surveying experience, made a thorough assessment. The house was in fine condition. It met every requirement: waterfront access, space for his office, room for the children. Then the broker told them this was the DeFeo house. Everyone in the country, it seemed, had heard about the DeFeo tragedy. Newspaper and television accounts had saturated the public consciousness. 6 people murdered in their beds. But that didn't deter the Lutzes. Kathy walked through the house, a house where 6 people had been shot to death less than 13 months earlier, and smiled. She told the broker, "It's the best we've seen. It's got everything we ever wanted." George vowed to himself that if there was a way, this was the place he wanted his wife to have. The tragic history of 12 Ocean Avenue didn't matter to them. They saw a home, a beautiful, spacious home on the water that they could afford. They knew about the murders. They didn't care. On December 18, 1975, the Lutzes moved in. The move was hectic. George and Kathy had packed the night before, sleeping on the floor. On moving day, George was up early, piling the first full load into a U-Haul trailer. The closing was scheduled for the same morning, a complex legal process complicated by the fact that the title to the house was still tied up in probate due to the DeFeo murders. Ronald DeFeo Jr., as the sole survivor of the family, was technically the inheritor of the estate, even though he had been convicted of murdering his family. The closing went through, with $40,000 placed in escrow until a proper legal deed could be arranged. At 1 o'clock, George rolled into the driveway of 112 Ocean Avenue. Friends were waiting to help unload. Furniture, boxes, crates, barrels, bags, toys, bikes. The DeFeos' refrigerator, washer, dryer, and freezer that had been in storage. The family's first days in the house were filled with the ordinary chaos of moving, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, setting up rooms. Daniel, 9, and Christopher, 7, would share one of the third-floor bedrooms. The other third-floor room would be a playroom. Missy, 5, would sleep on the second floor, across the hall from George and Kathy's master bedroom. Downstairs, there was the living room, dining room, kitchen, and a finished basement that George planned to convert into his office. Outside, there was the boathouse and swimming pool. It was a dream home, but it was also a dream that would turn into a nightmare. According to George and Kathy Lutz, strange things began happening almost immediately. They had decided to have the house blessed by a priest. A friend had suggested it, given the house's history. The Lutzes agreed. Father Mancuso, the priest they contacted, came to perform the blessing. According to the Lutz account, the priest sensed something wrong. He was said to have heard a voice shout, "Get out!" and felt a sharp slap on his face. But here we must pause and note, no priest has ever been conclusively identified as having performed this blessing. When investigators later searched for a priest matching this account, none could be found. The story of the priest, like many elements of the Lutz narrative, has been challenged by skeptics. But the Lutzes claim the incidents continued. Within days of moving in, George Lutz said he found himself waking up at precisely 3:15 a.m. every morning. This, he believed, was the time Ronald DeFeo Jr. had walked through the house shooting his family. The 3:15 a.m. waking became a recurring pattern. George claimed he was unable to sleep through the night, always jolted awake at the same hour. There were sounds, the family later claimed, banging noises, Footsteps untraceable to any family member's movements, the sound of a marching band playing in the house during the night. When George went to investigate the noises, he claimed to find furniture moved and carpets rolled up. There were odors, mysterious and pervasive stenches that came and went. There were sounds, the family later claimed, banging noises. Footsteps untraceable to any family member's movements, the sound of a marching band playing in the house during the night. When George went to investigate the noises, he claimed to find furniture moved and carpets rolled up. There were odors, mysterious and pervasive stenches that came and went. There was green slime, or greenish-black slime as some accounts described it, seeping from walls and flowing down the staircase. Other versions described a red substance or a gelatinous goo. The toilet water, the family said, turned black. Windows shattered spontaneously. Heavy doors suddenly came off their hinges. Flies appeared in swarms, hundreds of houseflies in a single room in the middle of winter. Cash disappeared from safe hiding places. Crucifixes were turned up safe hiding places. Crucifixes were turned upside down. And then there were the children. Missy, the 5-year-old, began speaking to an imaginary entity named Jody. Jody, according to the Lutzes, appeared to Missy sometimes as a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. Outside the house, huge cloven hoof prints were supposedly found in the snow. George Lutz claimed to have seen the eyes of a pig peering in through the windows. The family would later report that a demonic entity was watching them from outside and sometimes appeared to be inside the house, looking through the top-floor windows that resembled eyes of a jack-o'-lantern. The house became a place of terror. George fell ill. He went days without bathing. He lost weight. Kathy experienced constant nightmares. She levitated above the bed, the family claimed. At one point, she was said to have temporarily transformed into a wrinkled old woman, a 90-year-old crone. The family's behavior changed. The children began fighting with each other. They were, according to their own account, being systematically tormented. On January 14, 1976, just 28 days after moving in, the Lutzes fled. They left everything behind: furniture, clothes, possessions. They took only a few changes of clothes. They never returned. George Lutz once said that the hardest thing for those people who experience a haunting is the loss of being able to communicate with anyone else about it. It's not talked about, it's not understood, and when it happens to you, you become an alien to everyone else. But skeptics immediately noticed problems with the Lutz account. If windows were shattering and doors were being ripped from their hinges, why hadn't the family called the police? A later police officer asked, "What would you do if your doors were ripped off and your windows broke and 1,500 mysteriously disappeared? You'd call the police, right?" Well, the Lutzes never contacted the police until after they moved out. Neighbors did not recall seeing shattered windows or doors coming unmoored. The day after they fled the house, supposedly in terror, the Lutzes returned to hold a garage sale selling off various items. This detail had been cited by skeptics as evidence that the family was not as terrified as they claimed. But others have argued that the sale was simply a practical matter, getting rid of things they couldn't take. The contradictions and questions would only multiply as the story gained national attention. Within weeks of fleeing the house, the Lutzes began telling their story. They gave interviews. They worked with author Jay Anson to produce a book. The account was recorded on tape, 35 hours of interviews, and Anson used it to write what would become one of the most famous haunted house books ever published. The Amityville Horror, a true story, was published in September 1977. The book became an international sensation. It sold millions of copies, over 7 million within the first 3 years alone. It was promoted as a true story, a documented account of demonic infestation. The Lutzes' claims, as detailed by Anson, captivated readers around the world. Anson, a journalist and filmmaker who had made a short documentary on the making of The Exorcist, told Writer's Digest in 1979, "I wrote down what they told me happened, and I believe that they believe what they told me. Do I believe my own book? I neither believe it nor disbelieve it." The media frenzy was immense. Television shows covered the story. Paranormal investigators descended on Amityville. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue became a tourist destination. The 1979 film adaptation starring James Brolin and Margot Kidder, while critically panned, was a massive box office success. It became the year's second largest box office hit. The Amityville Horror had become a cultural phenomenon. Paranormal investigators were divided. Some, like Ed and Lorraine Warren, concluded that evil forces were at work. In a 2000 documentary, Ed Warren said, "This was no ordinary haunted house. On a scale of 1 to 10, this was a 10. Others were deeply skeptical. Dr. Stephen Kaplan, a paranormal investigator, said, "George Lutz's stories were too wide-ranging and probably stemmed from a pre-existing obsession with the paranormal." Skeptical investigators like Joe Nickell and Robert Bartholomew argued that the whole affair was a hoax. The book itself had created a cottage industry. The Amityville Horror, a true story, would spawn over a dozen sequels and spin-off films. There were documentaries, podcasts, books, endless debates. But as the story spread, so did the questions. Several people involved with the Amityville Horror franchise, the Lutzes, Anson, lawyers, the publisher, police officers sued one another. The disputes were about money, but they also hinted at deeper issues. If the events were true, why were the people involved fighting over profits? And if the story was a hoax, who was responsible? Lawsuits would reveal details that undermined the credibility of the Lutz account. William Weber, the lawyer who had represented Ronald DeFeo Jr., became one of the most damaging voices against the Lutz story. Weber claimed that he had collaborated with the Lutzes to create the haunting story, hoping to use it to gain a new trial for his client. According to Weber, the story was cooked up over many bottles of wine. He claimed that real-life details, such as a neighbor's cat peering in the window at night, were transformed into the supernatural elements of the book. "We took real-life incidents and transposed them," Weber told a reporter in 1988. In other words, it was a hoax, but the Lutzes never wavered. George Lutz responded to critics with defiance. "Our critics are people who've never been in the house, just people who read a book. No one who was ever in the house, who investigated it, ever called it a hoax. No one with any credentials who was personally involved ever called it a hoax. No one who helped us there, with the auction, with getting stuff to the Salvation Army, ever called it a hoax. All I know is what happened to me." The debate would continue for decades. What really happened at 112 Ocean Avenue? The question has haunted the case for almost 50 years, and the answer depends on who you ask. The skeptic's case against the haunting is extensive. First, there is the issue of the priest. The story of a priest being assaulted in order to get out is central to the Lutz account. But no priest matching the description was ever located. When journalists and investigators searched for this priest, they came up empty. Second, there is the issue of the police. The Lutzes claimed windows were shattered, doors ripped from hinges, and furniture moved. Yet they never called the police, not once during the 28 days. The local police chief's son, a journalist, later noted, during the entire 28-day siege that drove them from the house, they never once called the police. Third, there are the inconsistencies in the Lutz account itself. The family claimed to have found cloven hoof prints in the snow, but investigators discovered that there had been no snowfall at that time. The story of the green slime appeared to have origins in crime scene details. According to lawyer William Weber, he showed the Lutzes photographs of the crime scene, including black gook in the toilet bowls that was likely fingerprint powder. Weber claimed the Lutzes used these details to craft their narrative. The details of the haunting, skeptics noted, seemed suspiciously similar to horror films of the era, The Exorcist and The Omen in particular. Fourth, there were other owners of the house. After the Lutzes fled, the house was sold to James and Barbara Cromartie in 1977. They lived there for a decade. Barbara Cromartie told investigators that her family experienced no supernatural occurrences. She pointed out that the old hardware hinges, locks, doorknobs were still in place. If the Lutzes had experienced the damage they claimed, there should have been visible signs. But upon close inspection, there were no disturbances in the paint and varnish. The house has been sold at least 4 times since the murders. The owners since the Lutzes have all reported the same thing. Nothing strange happened. There have been 4 owners since the murders. Real estate agent Jerry O'Neill told a reporter in 2016, and none of them ran out of the house screaming, and there were no strange experiences. Fifth, there is the documentary evidence. In a 1979 trial, George and Kathy Lutz versus Paul Hoffman, the Lutzes reportedly admitted that virtually everything in the Amityville Horror was pure fiction. The lawsuit was over profits from the story, and the legal proceedings revealed that the narrative was not as solid as claimed. But the case for the haunting also has its defenders. The Lutzes passed lie detector tests, polygraph examinations to confirm the veracity of their claims. They consistently maintained that their story was true. George Lutz said, "I believe this has stayed alive for 25 years because it's a true story. It doesn't mean that everything that has ever been said about it is true. It's certainly not a hoax. It's real easy to call something a hoax. It's real easy to call something a hoax." The children have also spoken up. At least one of them, Daniel Lutz, who was 9 years old at the time, appeared in the 2013 documentary, My Amityville Horror. He maintained that the account given by his mother and stepfather was true. "This is not something I asked for," Daniel said in the film. "I've been running away from it, and it finally caught up with me." Daniel discussed abuse suffered at the hands of his stepfather, which he said contributed to the family's turmoil. He claimed that his stepfather had dabbled in Satanism, but his younger siblings declined to be interviewed and did not appear to endorse his claims. Skeptics have pointed out that Daniel's memory could be unreliable. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus has explained how people can fill in gaps in memory with exaggerations and additions. Daniel's version of events sometimes contradicted earlier accounts. For example, he claimed there were 400 to 500 flies in the room on moving day, a detail not mentioned in the original Lutz account and one that strains credibility. The 2013 documentary, My Amityville Horror, suggests a more nuanced interpretation. As one critic noted, "At some point it doesn't even matter if ghosts terrorize the Lutz family because Daniel believes it so wholeheartedly, and listening to him tell his tale becomes its own kind of truth. The question of whether the haunting was a hoax or not may be too simplistic. Some have argued that the story is a combination of factors, a family experiencing genuine fear, perhaps exacerbated by the house's history, and George Lutz's interest in the paranormal, which was then exaggerated and monetized. The Lutzes may have believed some of it, or perhaps they didn't." Jay Anson, who wrote the book, maintained an ambiguous position. "I neither believe it nor disbelieve it. The unresolved questions remain. If the Lutzes fabricated the story, why did they pass lie detector tests? If the story was true, why has no other owner of the house reported similar phenomena? Why did the Lutzes never call the police? Why did they return the next day to hold a garage sale? Where is the priest?" The questions have no definitive answers, and perhaps that is why the story persists. In the decades since the events at 112 Ocean Avenue, the Amityville story has left an indelible mark on American culture. The house itself has been changed. The famous spooky eye-shaped windows were modified by a later owner. The house number was changed. 112 Ocean Avenue no longer exists. It is now something else. But the legend remains. The book, The Amityville Horror, has sold millions of copies. Estimates range from 7 to 10 million. It inspired an entire genre of true haunted house stories, books, and films that claim to be based on real events. The 1979 film spawned a franchise of at least 17 official movies and hundreds of knockoffs and imitators. Every few years, a new version appears. A remake, a sequel, a documentary, each claiming to reveal the real story. The Amityville story has influenced other paranormal investigations. The Warrens, who investigated the house, went on to become famous paranormal investigators, later inspiring the Conjuring film series. The case became a template for haunted house narratives. A family moves into a home with a violent history, supernatural events escalate, and the family flees in terror. The formula has been repeated countless times. But beyond the entertainment industry, the case raises deeper questions about belief and skepticism. For believers, the Amityville story is evidence of the supernatural, a documented case of demonic infestation. For skeptics, it's a cautionary tale about fraud, media manipulation, and the power of suggestion. The truth, as with many such cases, may lie somewhere in between. George and Kathy Lutz divorced in 1980. Kathy died of emphysema in 2004. George died of heart disease in 2006. Ronald DeFeo Jr. died in prison on March 12, 2021, at the age of 69. He spent his entire adult life behind bars, convicted of killing his family, but never fully explaining why. In a 1994 prison interview, he said, "I guess the Amityville horror really is supposed to be me, because I'm the one that got convicted of killing my family. I'm the one they say who did it. I'm the one that's supposed to be possessed by the devil." The house at 112 Ocean Avenue continues to stand. It has been extensively remodeled. It no longer resembles the structure depicted in the films. It was sold for $605,000 in 2017. Every Halloween, the Amityville story resurfaces. Every few years, a new documentary or film appears. The debate continues, and the house remains a symbol of something that America cannot quite explain. What is the legacy of Amityville? It is a story about a family that was murdered, a house that became a legend, a family that claimed to be haunted, a story that made millions. But it is also a story about how we interpret events, how we choose to believe or not believe. The story persists because it asks a question that no one can definitively answer. Is there something beyond what we can see, beyond what we can see, beyond what we can explain? Ronald DeFeo Jr. insisted that voices drove him to kill. The Lutzes insisted that a demonic presence drove them from their home. Skeptics insist that it was all a hoax. Each version of the story serves a purpose. For the true believers, Amityville is proof of the supernatural. For skeptics, it's proof of human greed and credulity.